Hello, I have decided that today is Monday. It's actually Sunday because I'm on vacation pretty soon, and this means that I'm making the videos in advance. And I decided that these videos, these two videos that I'm doing, this being part 2, are going to come out on Monday. That's actually the day that I do the game streaming, and I don't have a video that comes out, but I want to have a video at least come out every day. I feel like I can make enough content to actually do that, so that's my plan now. This is Zomboy bass sound. Sort of. And this is the tutorial section where I discuss the how and why and super duper in-depth reasoning for all the things I've done. So the big star about all this is this idea of integrating ring modulation with frequency modulation inside Citrus, because you can do that with Citrus. Citrus has a whole ring modulation matrix. Ring modulation is similar to frequency modulation. Frequency modulation modulates the frequency or pitch of a waveform by another waveform, and then ring modulation modulates the amplitude of a waveform by another waveform. It's called ring modulation because the original hardware circuitry that accomplished its feat was that of a ring. It was a ring, a circular circuit. That's what caused this effect. So if you think about it, even a little bit about how electronics work, that should make a lot of sense to you. So that's why it's called ring modulation. It's also been known to be called amplitude modulation, or AM. Go figure. And so that's what's up with that. To sort of demonstrate this, I'm going to turn off all the effects so that we're hearing just the Citrus by itself. So what's happening here is that I have a waveform in Operator 2, and the decisions that I made to arrive here were largely random ones, with the exception of this idea of half and even being applied here. What these functions do appear on this waveform display are turning it into approximations of TX waveforms, which were very specialized waveforms that are available to the Yamaha DX7. FM8 has these waveforms, but they're just like the waveforms. You just have those waveforms. So if you look in FM8 in the waveform list, you see the TX lists. That's what these waveforms are. But here we actually have the option of procedurally applying those characteristics to waveforms that already exist, which I think is extremely powerful. So what this is doing, because remember that the way the way that FM works is that it's not exactly like a really, really fast LFO, which is how I used to interpret it. Is that it applies the change in pitch to a sound based on the change in slope of a waveform. So, like for a sine wave, the effect is largely, it sounds like it's being modified by a sine wave. But if I were to change it to, say, a triangle, what would end up happening is because the change in the slope of a triangle wave is just, the slope is 1, it's not changing. Well, in this case, the slope is -1. And then the slope is 1, it's not changing. And then it's -1, it's not changing. And then it's 1, it's not changing. So that means that it's tone, not changing, tone, immediately, nothing in between, no sweeping anything, the tone. So it goes, just goes up and down really fast. That's what happens when we use a triangle wave. So when we do this half business, what ends up happening is that we have one slope, and then we still have basically this not change in slope happening, but then we have nothing going on in the middle. So it's like this a whole bunch of different pitches, and then the original pitch, and then a bunch of different pitches, and then the original pitch. So it adds a slightly more complicated pitch environment happening to the FM. And then I added a bunch of harmonics pretty much as I saw fit to make that sound. Well, actually, to make this sound. That's what that sounds like. All that I just described. That's what that sounds like. But where did that tonality come from that had the sharpness to it? Where'd that come from? Well, that came from the ring modulation of Operator 2, which I just disabled. Ring modulation does work like it's an LFO, like it's just a straight up like just a really, really fast frequency oscillator. And so this means, although it gets a bit interesting. So we have to think about for a second what a waveform actually does, and what we mean by, say, like a period like an oscillator's period, or an oscillation, or a period. Like what we mean by all that. If you ever looked at a graph of like a waveform, you can see like the plus and minus, like the top is plus and the bottom is minus. That means that when it goes up, I guess I go from this side, it goes up, there's positive amplitude, and then it crosses 0, and then it goes down, and there's negative amplitude. Well, for things that say, like for these operators, we have positive volume, and then we have negative volume. This basically means it's positive, and then it's reverse phase. So it's a negative phase and then positive phase. So if we were to say keep this waveform, what this would mean is that it starts out negative phase and then it goes to 0, no volume. Center is no volume. And then it gets louder, positive, and then it gets quieter, no volume, and then it gets louder. So then while this might look like it's on, it's off, it's off, it's on, and then it's off. What's actually happening is that it's on, it's off, it's on, it's off, it's on. So it actually happens twice as much as we think it does, including having a reverse phase. So that's where these TX waveforms come in handy, because if we go to half phase, this means that the half, I guess, polarity, there's only positive movement. So this means that it's on, it's off, it's on, it's off, it's on. It's more regular. And then if we go to this half business, what this means is that only a second, like a particular portion of the whole waveform. So it says an even distribution of the first distribution. It's not the word I wanted to use, but basically a very small chunk of the waveform oscillation is going to be audible. But the thing about this though is that this is all pitched in a ratio fashion, which is to say that everything is moving around at the same pitch, and when you change note values, everything is still moves the correct speed, so that when this ring modulation is being applied to the oscillator that's FMing the output oscillator, the thinness that happens, the sort of sharp sound that occurs because we're carving out part of the waveform, it stays in the right pitch, and so it actually makes the sound have more, well, thin. It thins it out really, and that's kind of what I wanted to do. I could also apply this to operator 1. But I thought it was more interesting when I applied it to operator 2, because operator 2 is actually still it's FMing operator 1, and FM, actual modulating of an FM amount, is a product of changing the volume of the modulating operator. So this means that if operator 2 is constantly being on and off like that, like what is happening, that has an interesting impact on the output oscillator as its total modulation is being applied to it. So that's why I did that. And I changed the phase to basically fit the sound that I wanted, because if you move the phase of it, this is a very wide variety of sounds that you can make, which is very impressive. So then I distorted it, and then I vocoded it. I vocoded it because I wanted to get that, because I wanted to get what sounded like in the original sound, a sort of just vocody artifact kind of sound. It didn't sound like it was being vocoded by like a vocal or anything. Like, it had a vocalic quality to it. That's probably because it was some kind of massive setup. And because I'm describing all this stuff about how ring modulation works, you remember that you can do that in massive. You can actually set you can set the modulation oscillator to ring, and then have it modulate one of the oscillators in massive. That's what you can do. So like, that's why I think the sound was made with massive, and that's because it's very possible to do with massive. And then I distorted it again, because the sound was just very dirty and wet and just saturated. And same thing with the Maximus. Just like what's going on here is not super duper, super incredibly important. I just wanted to make sure the low end was as present as it could be. I mean, with all the distortion going on, this is probably something, again, I say again because I'm assuming you watched the video that I put out what would be yesterday on Sunday, which is still technically today because I'm recording all my tutorials this week today, because I'm going to Florida next weekend, but on Wednesday actually. But if you've watched that video, you heard me suggest the idea of reinforcing the sound with a sub oscillator, like just a note, a sub frequency note, a sub bass. And people do that a lot anyway, so that shouldn't be news to you if that's something that you're used to doing. But I tend not to have sounds that are so distorted that some of the original bass frequencies don't just fall through. But this is one of those examples, and so was the one on Sunday. So that's something that I can recommend is for you to, reinforce your tracks with sub. I believe I covered everything of importance. The main meat of what was going on here was pretty much in the citrus. What I decided to do in the Vocodex was not terribly important. It's pretty much the same thing as I said in the first part. If you didn't watch that, was I just set things to be the way they are, and that's how it sounds because that's why it sound that way. No, there's no super duper in-depth reason behind any of that. Yeah. So if you have any questions about this, let me know. And the request form for next week's Sound Design requests is the Facebook post that I linked in the description on this video. So go there if you have any requests, like the ones that you want to see done, and the ones that get the most likes will be the one that gets done. I'll be doing more than one, obviously, because as you can see, I've done more than one. But if you have any questions about any of that, let me know. And as usual, have a nice day.